Today we have Karmini Sharma, and she's presenting a paper titled Women's Perceived Safety and Labor Market Preferences. And we have agreed with Karmini that she's happy to take questions while she's presenting, so you don't need to wait until the end. And altogether we have 60 minutes, so we stop at 5:15. Okay, Karmini, floor is yours.
Thank you, Kristiina. Thank you for everyone who joined, despite this being kind of start of the holiday season and end of hectic semesters. But thanks so much for coming. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Karmini Sharma. I'm an assistant professor of economics. I joined Imperial College this year, and I'll be presenting to you my paper, Women's Perceived Safety and Labor Market Preferences. So this is kind of one of my PhD chapters and an offshoot of my job market paper. And is this conference, this seminar is kind of very good commitment device for me to like really push this forward. And so any comments at this point would be super useful and super helpful in kind of shaping, and a lot of analysis is still going on. So I'll talk about that as well. So I think we should explain this. Oops. Control F. Yeah. So we know, there's a huge literature on occupational gender segregation, and there's a very good review by Cortes and Pan that show that the different reasons why occupational gender segregation can come about. It's one of the key reasons why there is also a gender wage gap, and so while documenting all the factors that can lead to this gender segregation, they talk about factors such as intrinsic preference differences between men and women. For instance, preferences towards competition. Women are less likely to apply for jobs or occupations where competition is likely to be high, and such jobs are also likely to pay quite much higher than other jobs. They also talk about, for instance, that men and women can have different demand for different types of amenities or job characteristics that can lead to this occupational segregation. So, for instance, women, Basit Zafar and a lot of his co-authors, many of his co-authors have shown, for instance, that workplace flexibility is a key amenity that women prefer, and with the theory of compensating wage differential, that can kind of translate also into these gender wage gaps. And then we also have, they also talk about social norms. So social norms / gender identity can also cause men and women to select into different types of jobs. Now, with this said, however, the role of workplace sexual harassment is an understudied factor in terms of shaping preferences for different types of job characteristics. One, of course, seminal paper in this case is Folke and Rickney's paper, who show that perceived risk of sexual harassment can also exacerbate these occupational gender segregation in Sweden, where both men and women are less likely to opt for jobs where they are a gender minority because they perceive higher sexual harassment risk for themselves. Now, a very key thing that, given this context, is that to deal with workplace sexual harassment, many lawmakers and policymakers emphasize on making women, who are most likely going to be victims of sexual harassment in the workplace, become more aware about sexual harassment, or get more information about what are the different types of reporting mechanisms to deal with sexual harassment. However, there is no clear understanding of how this information campaign can affect women, and that's where this project kind of comes into the picture. It's also kind of very key to understand this, the effects of such information on, for instance, women's labor market outcomes or their preferences, especially in the context of, for instance, India, where female urban labor force participation is very low, which is where I'm studying this as well. And so what I do in this paper is that I study the impact of perceived sexual harassment using this information campaign or information intervention on women's labor market decisions over different types of jobs. And one key thing, one potential kind of uh, mechanism through which I would think that this information will affect women's labor market preferences or their outcomes would be through these two possible channels. One is what I call a caution or an avoidance approach, which is that giving women information about sexual harassment can, of course, make them more aware or detect sexual harassment more easily, but it can also, through that, make them more likely to avoid events or places where they think that likelihood of interacting with men is likely to be high, who they would think will increase their perception of their risk of sexual harassment. So that can translate to, for instance, women less likely to choose jobs where their engagement with men is high. This is, for instance, inspired by the fact that there is some evidence that, well, there is a lot of evidence now that has been shown that fear of sexual violence can really affect women's economic choices, be it their educational choices or be it their labor market engagement. On the other hand, what this information can also end up doing is by making women more aware about sexual harassment and the potential redressal mechanisms, it can also make women more empowered to have control over their exposure to harassment. So for instance, if I know that a particular interaction is sexual harassment, then I can also, be cautious and well, not be cautious, but empowered to say, hey, that is sexual harassment, or report against it. And with that, I can also have more control over who I interact with and avoid potential risk of harassment. So that kind of, that can also lead to this empowerment effect, which is that now a woman empowered with this information might be more confident to go into workplaces where there are more men, or there is likelihood of a higher likelihood of interacting with men, because now they know that, hey, even if there is harassment, I know that I can detect it and I know that I can complain against it. And so however, because of this, the effects of this intervention on either sexual harassment or on labor market preferences becomes ambiguous, because firstly, for sexual harassment, there is just increased detection. So I just detect more sexual harassment in my environment. But on the other hand, because I detect more, because I'm also now more aware, I can reduce my possibility of exposure to sexual harassment by avoiding certain places, etc. And so that can reduce my potential exposure to harassment. And with the labor market preferences, the other two possible channels can create these ambiguous effects as well. So in this project, I collaborated with a co-educational college, that is a college that had both male and female students, to undertake a field experiment with just the women.
Karmini, can I just ask one, just to make sure, because there was a question also from the audience, that have you changed, are you still on the first slide, or is it?
No, I'm on the fourth slide.
Okay, what we see is still the motivational slide.
So it says my screen sharing is paused. I'm not sure why. Oh, let's see.
Now we see the slide changing.
Okay. Okay, I have no idea how this happened. Right, but I can't see any. Okay, I'll try to see if this works. So, and so what I did was, what I did was randomly selected women in different classes of this college, received information on sexual harassment, principles to detect harassment, and also on potential redressal mechanisms to sexual harassment in the institution. And so the sample is these college-going women who were about to make their labor market entry decisions. Many of them also go into higher studies, and I'll talk about that later. So I study the impact on labor market preferences of these women using a choice experiment. and their self-reported labor market outcomes at about 4 months after the intervention and after 3 years and at 3 years after the intervention. I'm still collecting their labor market outcomes using online platforms, which is still ongoing. And so I'm going to be able to talk about that later. Well, sometime later. So you see my slides moving now. We can't.
Sorry, it's still on the fourth slide. Okay, now it changed.
Okay. Well, I don't know what's going on here, but okay, so I'll see. So yeah, so I'll talk about the context, the design, the econometric specification, and then I'll talk about the results. Then I'll talk about what the choice experiment was after I've shown you overall labor market results and then the potential mechanisms, and then I'll conclude. Right. So here I'm showing you the baseline information from the women.
Okay, I think you need to change the slide again. Yes, now.
So right. So here I'm showing you the baseline information from the women in the college, where you can see that, you know, when I asked them, hey, do you plan to work in the future after completing your studies, roughly 18% of them wanted to work. But a much higher percentage wanted to sit for interviews if they got a chance to do so in their college. And that discrepancy could be if they just wanted to kind of try out and see if they would like, you know, if there is a company that they would not get a chance to get at, or that they would not get access to outside the college or outside the college's placement activities. And so this could have motivated many of them to sit for interviews. Only 11% of them had interned previously. At the same time, close to 45% of them had been harassed on the streets, had faced harassment on the streets in the 2 months prior to the survey. Close to 30% of them had been harassed within campus, so within their college. 44% of them had faced harassment of lower intermediate intensity. So this includes, for instance, sexual harassment in terms of sexual jokes, sexual remarks, being asked repeatedly out on a date, or physical intimidation, online sexual harassment. And then approximately 17% of them had also faced more extreme forms of harassment like groping, pinching, and fondling. Close to half of them. So close to half of them had. Close to half of them could answer some of the baseline questions on sexual harassment correctly, and I'll show the impact on what happens after I give them the information about the treatment. So I'll talk now about the experimental design. And so here, I collaborate with this college, and think of this college as a small university, which has 18 courses of study. So maths, economics, sciences, so hard sciences, then, you know, they have anthropology, they have sociology, they have, you know, gambit of courses of study. Each course is roughly each course is actually for 3 years of study, but it might have multiple sections and multiple mediums of study and this gives me a total of 69 classes in this college. These classes were stratified on certain variables. And then women in each class were then randomized into treatment and control. The stratification at the class level happened because I also randomized classes into high intensity and low intensity treatments, and varying the proportion of women who were treated in each class. But today I'm just going to be talking about the individual level randomization that I did. I also collected women's baseline networks. So I collected information on who their friends are within the college, whether they were in their class or outside the class, etc. And so that analysis is still ongoing, where I want to look at what's the effect of the intervention when you have when you can also have your friends who were treated in your network. So all the results today have to be taken with that caveat, of course, in mind as well. So the female intervention itself was such that women so when I went to a class, so women were divided into treatment and control using a treatment and control survey instruments. So just to kind of give you an idea, this picture was taken with consent. And so the idea here is that, women were taken to a separate room where they had complete privacy, and they were, handed out tablets or these devices. And they could also do it on their phone if they wanted to. And then some women, randomly selected women, received the survey that had the information about sexual harassment, how can they access redressal mechanisms through against sexual harassment in their college, and what those mechanisms are. So and then the
Just a clarifying question, Karmini. So at the same time, no men on the class were treated any. This was just for the females.
Correct. Yeah. Now, the information that women received was information on what is sexual harassment, principles to detect harassment, and also information, as I said, about the legal reporting mechanisms to report harassment and seek advice against it. And control women simply filled a survey. They did answer a few questions on sexual harassment, but there was none of this information above. And so this is, for instance, this was all kind of created in collaboration with one of the NGOs that has done these kind of information campaigns quite extensively. And one of the key reasons why I wanted to study this is also because whenever these information campaigns are done, or if a training session is done, etc., and it's made voluntary, which it is, it has to be, what happens is that it usually just attracts women. And so the idea here is to see, okay, giving this information to women, what is the impact of doing this? And this is also kind of mandatory in workplaces. So regarding the timeline, regarding the timeline, so this was done in November 2019, where there was a baseline that was within the survey, and then after they complete their baseline information, they fill in their baseline information, they are randomized into treatment or control, and they read about the treatment within the survey. Then approximately 4 months after the intervention, I did the first N-line with them. And then approximately three years after the intervention, I did the second N-line with them. I was able to recover 84% of the sample in the medium run, 50% in the long run, with a total of about 87% of the sample that was resurveyed at least once between the N-line 1 and N-line 2. And so with regards to the econometric specification, given the very simple design setup, the specification here is very straightforward. So I'll be regressing outcome for female student I in class C on the treatment status of her own. So her own treatment status, whether she's treated or controlled. And then her baseline characteristics picked up by a post-double selection lasso method, robust standard errors, and then I also have class fixed effects which also helps me improve power. In terms of the balance tests, everything, the balance tests kind of go through. I find that, just to kind of give you an idea of the background of these women, most of these women have highly educated fathers. Also, they're more likely to have highly educated mothers, but less so than the fathers. Many of them also belong to historically disadvantaged groups in sections in India. They are called SC, ST, OBCs, but still majority of them come from the more upper caste, or the more advantaged sections. Yeah.
Can I ask just a clarifying question? You had the class fixed effect. So the randomization happened within the class. I'm just wondering about the type of treatment, which is this kind of information treatment. How do you expect not the other women within the class not to be, or is it
No, of course, yeah. So so that's why I was saying. So I collected, of course, that's absolutely right. So I collected these women's baseline network information, and so the results that I'm going to show to you will not take that network into account right now. I need to do the spillover analysis, but yeah, but that's the caveat of the results that I'll show you today. But those are kind of the first pass of the results, and so yeah, but that's kind of the work in progress. Then yeah, so most of them are so majority of them are also Hindus in this case. But I also use the caste-based variation later to do heterogeneity of some of the short-run results. Many of them take public transportation. So as you saw earlier, many of them face a lot of harassment, public harassment, so street harassment, which is kind of course, correlated with the fact that many of them take the metro or in general, they take a lot of public transportation to come to college. So this is kind of very fairly standard, but as far as where these women come from, they come from all over India. So there's a good geographic representation of where these women are from. I don't know if you saw my balance test. Did you see my balance test?
No.
Okay, let me try that again. So these were my balance tests, if you see them. Yeah, so these were my balance tests. This is what I was showing you. These are the, most of these women have highly educated parents. Both mother and father, but father is more likely. So many of them come from upper castes, but there's a good distribution between lower and upper castes in this case. Most of them are Hindus, and many of them take public transportation. So let me go back now. Right. So now I'm going to show you the results. And for the results, I'm going to start with the short-run results. The extreme short-run, think of it as time zero. So remember that women were given these tablets or these devices. And so immediately after that, I collected some information from them. So the first information that I had collected from them was to ask them about their exposure to sexual harassment. So I asked them, in the last 2 months, did you face sexual harassment from any group of people that you knew, whether within or outside college, etc.? Sorry, both of them. And so here I find that women are 10 percentage points, treated women are 10 percentage points more likely to claim that they, or more likely to recall about sexual harassment instances. When I asked them about, I asked them about sexual harassment also in different types of environments. For instance, in college parties or in what we call college fests or festivals, outside the college, inside the college. And that also increases by 0.16 standard deviation. So this is, remember, this is immediately the short run. So there's no possibility of any spillovers in this case. And then when I asked them about very specific questions about sexual harassment, whether, for instance, somebody threw a sexual remark at you or a sexual joke at you, and like these specific questions, then I don't find any effect of the treatment. So the way that I kind of think about these results is that one is that it's possible that the SEQ, that is column 3, is not capturing all the possible instances that can happen to women in different types of environments, but also that it's possible that when you ask women about sexual harassment, after giving them information about harassment, makes them label a lot more instances as sexual harassment than the control group, which was not given that information.
Sorry.
But this is, yeah.
Sorry, I'm closing. Okay, sorry, I had an echo because I was on the phone and the computer. Just the information the information intervention is going to have a meaningful impact if at baseline they don't have that info. So did you gather baseline information from them on whether they're aware of the internal complaints committee in the college or what they think sexual harassment is?
Yes. So as I was showing you, approximately 50% of them were able to identify correctly instances of sexual harassment. However, in particular with regards to the College Complaints Committee, only 11% of them were able to identify that that's the committee that they need to report to. So there is a huge gap in what they know about their college infrastructure. Right. So these are the ultimate short-run effects. And then I asked,
Sorry, just natural follow-on is, also, as an outcome, did you also ask whether they reported to that internal complaints committee in the college? Because now they're saying they suffered it, but whether they reported it, because I'm just trying to tie the treatment back to, the results back to the treatment, to see if you gave them info on what it is and on how to go to or that the ICC exists and they can go to it. Did they then go to it?
So I will have to check those results, because ultimately nobody goes to the College Complaints Committee, because they're, even after in other work that I've seen as well, even after you give them this information, or you do, intense trainings with them, their trust in the College Complaints Committee is just not good. So they don't really trust that the college is going to do anything about something like this. And so at the baseline, I remember the actual complaint about sexual harassment was very low. But I can dig out those specific numbers for you. So the short-run results in this case were driven by women who were from the SC/ST groups that I told you about, that is the historically disadvantaged sections. Now, these women, so we know from other work that these women are also more likely to be mobile. They are more likely to have interactions outside of their home, or outside of, also possibly with men. And then I also find that women with fewer male friends also were driving this this result on recall of sexual harassment. Now, these are it's a little bit of a long stretch to connect the two, but the way that I interpret these results being driven by these groups of women is that these might be women who are more exposed to sexual harassment, but on whom the information constraints or availability of this kind of information might be much lesser or much lower. And so the treatment kind of ends up making a larger impact on these women in terms of recalling instances of sexual harassment. I find that also that the treatment not only affects women's own perception of sexual harassment, but it also increases their perception of sexual harassment for other women in their classes. So in general, their perception of risk of sexual harassment goes up for everyone, for all women. So now I'm going to talk to you. So this is, remember, these were just the time zero results in a way. Now I'm going to talk to you about the medium and the long run results. And these are basically, I went back to these women after 3 or 4 months, and then after 3 years, and I collected a bunch of outcomes from them, which is what I'm going to talk to you about now. So the first was that I was interested in understanding about what happens to these women's labor market outcomes, what happens to their actual labor market experience. Are they more likely to have a job when I survey them? Are they more likely to have applied for a job? Do they have higher labor market aspirations or not? So I look at 3 types of groups of outcomes. One is labor market experience, so their actual outcomes. One is labor market aspiration. So this is relevant only for mostly just for the medium run, because at that time, women were making their decisions whether they're going to go into the job market, they're going to pursue higher studies, or they are going to just drop out and they are just going to be married or do nothing in that case. And then the last is labor market search efforts, so in the case of medium run, when they were still in college, that means whether you are more likely to be on online job platforms, or you have applied for more job applications. In the long run, it still means that you might be unemployed, but you're still looking for jobs in the same way. And so in both firstly, in terms of labor market experience, I do not find any meaningful effects of the treatment on women's actual labor market outcomes. And as far as their search efforts are concerned, I don't find any meaningful effects over there. And that kind of is tied back to the, mechanisms that I was talking about the two ways in which this information could be potentially working. But it's also possible that when women are making these decisions, they're not putting, especially whether they are going to take the extensive margin decision of whether they are going to undertake labor market search effort or they're going to take up a job or not, is not going to be severely affected by this information treatment. And the results kind of are similar in the long run as well. The only thing I find, but I don't want to emphasize on it too much, is that in the medium run, I find that women who were right in the last year of study, they increased their job applications as a result of the treatment. And so that kind of points to, again, like these different types of effects of this intervention that I'm going to talk to you about later, because that's a little bit opposite of what I'm finding in terms of women's preferences for types of jobs. I'll come back to this result. Yeah.
I'm just curious about the fact that you don't, like, it looks like the mean for the, that there's basically no women in your sample working in the medium round or having any labor market, any of these outcomes, the mean is 0. So I'm just wondering how should we think about it? Or is it a typo possibly? Because
yeah, no. So for the medium run, so yeah, so this is tricky about like showing these results. So in the medium run, the labor market experience, aspirational search effort, these questions are indices. So it's basically a combination of questions. So I've created an index, so I've standardized them. So that's why the control mean is 0. But in the long run, these results are really binary outcomes. So so yeah, that's I should learn how to. I need to think about like showing them in a better way. But yeah, but that's a good question. Thank you. So yeah, so the way that you want to interpret this is that women's labor market aspirations, if anything, if they're going up by 0.1 standard deviation in this case, if it was significant. Right. And so these are the labor market outcomes for women. And then what I wanted to understand is, as I was telling you earlier, is about, okay, so if on the extensive margin, this information treatment is not affecting the women, what about their preferences over different types of jobs? So what I did was I did a choice experiment with these women. Yeah. Where each respondent in both the medium and the long run was shown 2 types of jobs, job A and job B. And they were asked to assume, so basically what I kept fixed on those jobs is the timing, the location, and the salary of the 2 jobs were fixed at first stage. Then I varied between jobs A and job B, whether one was a male majority job and other was a gender balanced job. So the male majority job had 75% men, while gender balanced job had 50% men. And then and this is a within subject. So you see job A, job B with these varying percentages of men. And then between subjects, what I also varied was manager gender, whether you saw a male manager on that job or I mentioned a female manager on that job. So what it looked like in particular was something like this, is that I asked them, a job is offered to you with timings 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. The location of this job is Gurgaon, which is kind of this corporate headquarters near Delhi. And you'll be paid 20,000 INR. The manager, and this was varied, either it was Sapna or Ashish. So either you'll see Sapna or you'll see Ashish. You won't see both. So the manager offers you this job as part of a male majority or a gender balanced team. And this person also manages this job. All members of this team will only be hired on the basis of their ability, so that you don't change your perception about discrimination or other things in terms of how other people are hired and how you'll be hired. And then I asked them, which job would you take up? Until here, the question was absolutely the same between the medium and the long run. then in the medium run, because I had more time with women, what I also did was I varied the salary level. So if you tell me I'll take job A, I reduce the salary of that job from 20,000 to about 18,000 or 20,000 to about 16,000. Randomly, I vary that reduction. And then I ask you to choose again. And with this way, I can also trace out or try to trace out a demand curve for gender balance versus male majority jobs. And I'll show you the results for both of those. So now what I do is I'll first show you the result of this the first level of decision, which is whether you go for a gender balanced job versus whether you go for a male majority job. So the dependent variable here is 1 if you choose the gender balanced job, and 0 if you choose, of course, if you choose the male majority job. And so in the medium run, what I find is firstly, just from the control mean, as you can see, as is typical for this context, and in general, is that, the control mean is very high. So most of the women will prefer to go for a gender balanced job already. Right? The treatment ends up increasing that preference even further for women, right? And it increases by 5 percentage points in the medium run and 14 percentage points in the long run, to the extent that all women would then take up the gender balanced job. On the other hand, when I varied the gender of the manager, what I find is that this effect can potentially be ameliorated completely by having a female manager on the job. So then if the treatment makes you more cautious in terms of going to a male majority job, a female manager is able to reduce that concern or kind of pacify that concern in some way, to the extent that there is just no difference after having a female manager between treatment and control women. And this result becomes stronger in the long run as well. And so here, this kind of goes back to, Kristiina's work on violence against women also talks about the fact that even if female managers are, female managed firms do not see differential exposure or differential violence, but they do find that those women are more likely to fire perpetrators. And that it could be the case, or this might be one of the reasons this kind of translates into women perceiving that there is lower risk, or maybe a higher chance that if I am harassed or something does happen to me at the workplace, it's likely that something will be done about it if I have a female manager. And so this is kind of the core result of the paper. I have to say that, moving forward. And so this kind of also goes back to, like, this is where a lot of the follow-up work that I am now doing also comes about, where to study kind of what other amenities can be provided in the workplace that help to reduce these concerns about potential of or the risk of sexual harassment, which can also help to kind of negate these effects that increased information or increased awareness about sexual harassment can have on potential victims in this case in particular, and make them overcautious. So then so these results, the next set of results are going to be a little bit noisier because of the sample concerns. But here, if you remember, what I did was I also varied the relative wage of the job. So firstly, just there's a sanity check here. So the dependent variable is exactly the same as before, and I'm just regressing it on the treatment, interacted with the relative wage of the male majority job versus the gender balanced job. So for columns 1 and 2 give you the basic sanity check that if you increase the relative wage of the male majority job by 100%, it's going to reduce the demand for the gender balanced job by about 21%. When I kind of interacted this with the treatment, again, these results become super noisy, but like the only suggestive result over here is the fact that in line with what I was finding earlier is what the treatment is ending up doing is making that the demand for gender balanced job relatively more inelastic. So the way that you want to interpret these results is that if now you increase for treated women, if you increase the relative wage of male majority jobs by 100%, their demand for gender balanced job reduces only by 8%. So that, so what is, again, the treatment suggestively again doing is that it's making women's demand for gender balanced job relatively inelastic, again, making them potentially more cautious into going into jobs where their potential for interaction with men is high.
Karmini, a question.
Yeah.
Find these, so these are very interesting results, the conjoint results. Do you also are stronger in the cuts of data that responded more in the short run? Then it's easier to see why the treatment would map into these long run outcomes. So you mentioned women who have fewer friends, less educated mothers, and there was one more thing. They respond in the short run. So
Yeah.
to respond more in the long run, are treatment effects mirroring the heterogeneity, I mean?
Oh, I see. I can check that. I've not done that. I think the only, because the only thing is, like, as I start cutting this data more, like, the power is just going to go down even more. So I did not want to, but you're right. Even the previous results that I have, where I am sufficiently powered, I can look at those heterogeneities and check for that. Yeah. Thank you.
To argue that these are genuinely treatment effects rather than some artifact, especially as time has passed.
Got it.
To follow the same pattern, like a
Got it. Yeah, I can do that.
So the wage variation.
Yeah.
How much did you vary the wage? I understand the concept, but did you have 10 in the list, or how did you do it?
No, what I did was, I have to now remember this. So the way I did it was, so from 20,000, you went to either 18,000 or 16,000. That's the second level. And then you went down. So if you still stick to that job, then it will go further down to either 8,000 or 6,000. That was the variation. That's the only thing I could do given the constraint I had in terms of time.
So it was like a stepped process.
Correct. Yes. And so the moment you switch, that's the time it ends, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. So to kind of summarize the results, overall, the information on sexual harassment does not seem to be affecting women's labor market outcomes. So their extensive margin of decision in terms of whether they want to be employed or not, or whether they are searching for jobs or not, or they're aspiring to get a job or not. But what it is affecting is this kind of decision on what kind of jobs they want to go for. So their demand for gender balanced jobs or occupations increases as a result of the treatment. The treatment also makes the demand for gender balanced job relatively inelastic, suggestively. However, I find very strongly that having a female manager, and again, I'm more confident about those results, given that they are also between subject, is that having a female manager can completely ameliorate those effects of the treatment on women becoming more cautious in terms of going to male majority jobs. And that's very policy relevant, again, because especially in this context, for instance, and I'm sure like that's relevant for other countries facing lower female labor force participation, is that we also want to think about how to get women into these jobs where many men are, because those jobs are also paid much more than other jobs where women are more likely to go. So it has kind of repercussions for gender wage gaps and other impacts we care about. Right. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the supportive mechanisms, or some of the kind of also a little bit confusing information that I have from some of the mechanisms, but let's see what you think about those. Right. So first, I show you what happened when I went back to these women and I asked them about different types of sexual harassment, hypothetical case scenarios, and I asked them about, I varied a lot of the characteristics of the information I was asking them about, and tell me whether something is harassment or not. And I also asked them about false positives. I find overall, when I use that information, I don't find effects on women's awareness overall. Now, the caveat here is I have not accounted for spillovers, and that's where Kristiina's, the comment, Kristiina, that you were giving me becomes very important in this case, is that I really need to now dig into those networks and like find out if this is exactly continuing to be true. But one thing that's happening, for instance, in the medium run, the situation where I asked them about dating was actually a false positive. And I find that women are less likely to, well, women are still calling a false positive sexual harassment scenario as sexual harassment. On the other hand, they are more likely to say an ambiguous sexual harassment. They're correctly identifying an ambiguous sexual harassment scenario as sexual harassment. So there is kind of, it's going a little bit all over the place. So again, like I need to kind of look into these networks and understand these results more.
In principle, you can say that your estimates are conservative because the spillover is of information and
Correct.
essentially on recognizing sexual harassment. So they shouldn't be all over the place or wrongly signed. They should just be conservative estimates of what you would get if the spillover was accounted for.
That is true. That is true. And I think in that, that's absolutely true. I think in that, again, like I think some of the null effects as well on information, like that's the one that I'm kind of more, concerned about. Again, on labor market results. Also, however, for labor market outcomes, the coefficients are fairly small that I'm not, especially in the long run, that I'm not super duper concerned. But I think in terms of information, yes, you're right. Wherever I'm finding those effects, I'm kind of like I can be sufficiently confident, but wherever I have these null effects, I do need to kind of dig into the networks. Then I move on to sexual harassment. So remember, for self-reported sexual harassment of women, now there are differences, because in the short run, when I was asking women about sexual harassment, they were recalling about sexual harassment, right? That which has happened to them. And of course, without any spillover concerns, etc. But when I'm talking to them 3 to 4 months after the survey and 2 to 3 years after the intervention, the results are kind of now going to be a mix of the fact that women know about sexual harassment, or they were potentially more, they became more cued to sexual harassment, but they were also becoming more cautious about sexual harassment or about interaction with men, then that might also reduce their exposure to harassment, right? So these two effects, again, because of these channels, can go into opposite directions. And so that's exactly what I find here in my results, is that I don't find effects of the treatment in the medium run or the long run on any of those other types of sexual harassment that I showed you for in the short run.
But Karmini, I think 70% of these women are not working. So then they can't be exposed to workplace harassment, and they're less exposed to commuting harassment because they don't commute. So what's left is just some street harassment from leisure trips outside. So I'm thinking that even though you'll cut your sample, in the small sample, you might see a big effect if you focus on those who work.
Oh,
Sample here, those who work and those who don't.
I could definitely check that. However, not a lot of women go into the labor market after graduating, even out in the 3 years. Many of them are go into higher education. So there is still potential of them, experiencing harassment. So, but you're right. I can look into that. I can look into the differential by work status.
So yeah, you can pool those who are in university and workplaces, but just separate those who are at home, married.
Not many. There are not many who are at home, thank God. So I mean, I don't know, I have no judgment, but but these are very young women. So yeah.
Labor market, the long run panel at the bottom had a mean of 0.34. So I was thinking that in the long run, 34% work, and then 17-ish% don't. But
That's true. That's true. Yeah, but I start losing power when I start digging into long run results and create subgroups there, especially for long run. I could see for medium run. Let me see that. Let me see that. Thank you for the suggestion. Yeah.
I'm wondering now, Karmini, because we have 10 minutes left. I was wondering whether you are happy with people start asking questions. Like they have been allowed to ask questions, but I'm just wondering whether you would rather want to like stop if someone wants to. I have a couple of questions in mind, but I think that as a host, I can let others ask as well.
No. I just have 2 slides, so I think it's fine if you ask me a question. Please ask me a question. So, or I can cover the slides and then we can leave the floor for everyone to go.
Let's cover the slides and then we'll
Okay. So I don't know why I skipped this slide, how this happened, but anyway, but like this is again kind of confirmation of the cautious approach that I was telling you, which is that in the medium run, when I asked women about their different types of relationships, they are less likely to be in a romantic relationship if they are treated, but that whether it is somebody in their own class, whether it is anywhere outside as well. So overall, these women's relationships with men go down, with male friends or suggestively as well. And in the long run, these results kind of dissipate. And one of the reasons, the way that I rationalize these results is that, again, that once women, when they're in university and they're in college, they're kind of more restricted in terms of who their potential partners are. Anyway, very few of them actually enter into romantic relationships. But in general, they're restricted in terms of their search for partners. But when they do graduate, they have a greater, or an access to a greater pool of potential partners. And that can, that basically means that they can choose better, hopefully. So this again kind of confirms the result on the caution-based approach or the caution-based channel that I was talking to you about. And, and this is not to say, I don't want to call it, any kind of like, I would be very careful to call it kind of an unwanted effect of the treatment, because we do want women to be aware. We do want women to know about, legal complaints committee in their college or other things that are available to them. But we do need to be aware that this can have this, there would be a time when they're going to be adjusting using that information that now comes to them in this new way of looking at life. And we do want to be then more proactive in terms of thinking about, okay, now we are, if we do show them reality in terms of what is their actual risk of harassment, let's think about how to reduce this risk in general. And so that is where, the result on having female managers, for instance, helping to reduce that caution in terms of what kind of jobs they want to go into is kind of an important result. And with that, again, Kristiina's work, we also have upcoming work where we are looking at how different amenities in the workplace can help to reduce this perceived sexual harassment risk in jobs as well. But yeah, I think I'm gonna end it. That was not a good conclusion, but that's I think you get the narrative that I'm going for. Thank you so much.